when we talked last time, and I think it was over a year ago, your last time here, I think so, you were describing how very power efficient and ruthless can the Conservative Party be in shifting leadership, in shifting ideas and kind of reinventing itself. But it seems that this last year, it's getting completely out of touch. And when you watch, and I'm formerly a marketer, and when I see campaigns of Nigel Farage and Rishi Sunak, it's so strikingly unauthentic what Rishi Sunak does. He just seems like a corporate clerk trying to be cool.
He's a technocrat.
Yeah.
He's a technocrat.
So what happened with the ruthless leadership of a party that would otherwise, slash Sunak and try somebody else and do anything to politically survive, because it seems it's suicidal at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, firstly on Rishi Sunak, here's something every Czech listening needs to know. Rishi Sunak had no mandate. You have to remember this. He was not elected by the voters. He was not elected by Conservative members. So what happened is Boris Johnson won a mandate from Conservative Party members in a leadership election. He was then deposed by Conservative Tory elites because they didn't like Boris Johnson and they were then influenced by the Partygate scandal. Liz Truss then won a mandate to become the leader of the Conservative Party. Now, whatever you think about Liz Truss, she then tried to do something radical by cutting taxes, pushing back the state, trying to find a way to growth, right? Well, the Tory elites didn't like that either. So they deposed Liz Truss, right? And she was gone. Then they appointed Rishi Sunak. And what they said at the time was that the adults are back in charge. Boris Johnson was a child. Liz Truss was a child.
And he lost to Truss.
Rishi
Sunak.
Rishi Sunak, who had been defeated by Liz Truss, was now back in charge. The adults were back in charge. Okay. So all of the Tory elites in London said, we're back in charge. Thank goodness. Power is back. We're back in charge. Now, of course, what we've then seen since Rishi Sunak was installed is the collapse, the complete collapse of the Conservative Party's support. Because what Tory elites have not understood, for them, that was a ruthless move for renewal. Rishi Sunak was partly about a return to managerialism, a return to technocracy, a return to Tory elites. But what then happened is you quickly realize Rishi Sunak had no vision, no idea, no program for the country. So you would think after all of that effort of Rishi Sunak working to destroy Boris Johnson, to destroy Liz Truss, to get appointed, you would think he'd have something to do. But what he did is he said, okay, I want to ban smoking. That was one of his big policies. I want to reform exams for school children. I want to stop a high-speed rail line. And that's basically it. That was the Sunak vision. So what was it for? What was all of this for? Right? And what it was for was to put somebody into office who's managerial, who's a technocrat, who's part of the global elite. He was a former banker. He spent time in America. The rumor is he's already got his children registered in a school in California for next year. He's already assumed that he's going to lose this election. And the worst bit about Rishi Sunak is when we had our D-Day anniversary, the 80th year of D-Day, which for Brits and for everybody really in Europe, this is an incredibly important moment. It's a symbolic moment, existential moment. Rishi Sunak went for the morning and then left early. And what that did during the election campaign, what that did is it made a lot of British people ask themselves a very deep question, which is, does this guy even believe in Britain? Does he really believe in the country, or is he just part of this amorphous, international, global, jet-setting elite class that don't really care about our national history and our values? And of course, for Nigel Farage, who is completely, Nigel, who I know very well, he's obsessed with military history. He's obsessed with the Second World War. He goes to battlefields on his holidays. He is Mr. World War II, okay? But for him, he was absolutely outraged that Sunak had left the anniversary early. And it was at that moment in the polls, you saw the Conservatives go even lower to 18, 19%. Never seen that before. And Farage then becomes much more popular.
how much of Rishi Sunak's inability for action, for political program, is caused by him not having any content, which I think is strange after so many years in the Tory party, and because we see a similar situation in the Czech Republic where we have supposedly conservative prime minister, the ODS guy Petr Fiala, but the government is unable to do much because the coalition is so broad. So my question is, with the Tory majority, how willing would they be, all the numbers, to go for some kind of radical reform agenda, or is the party already, somewhere else ideologically?
Well, remember, the British Conservative Party in 2019 won the biggest majority any Conservative Party has had since the days of Margaret Thatcher. They had an 80-seat majority with Boris Johnson. They could have done anything they wanted to do, okay? And we need to be clear about this point. They could have reformed the institutions. They could have overturned Tony Blair's legislation. They could have left the European Convention on Human Rights. They could have done whatever they needed to do to stop the small boats and the illegal migration crisis on the border. They could have dramatically lowered migration and had a genuinely high-skill policy, which is what Boris Johnson promised. They could have leveled up the left behind regions. They could have completely changed the way we run our National Health Service. They could have prioritized British people and British families in the housing crisis. They could have basically overseen a revolution if they had wanted to. If they had wanted to. And the key point is the British Tories, when they won the 80-seat majority, they didn't know what to do with that power because philosophically, ideologically, they don't really know who they are anymore. They don't have a unifying ideology anymore, right? This isn't like Margaret Thatcher, who was genuinely a revolutionary. I mean, she had a very good, high quality number of people around her who said, okay, we have a different theory of the economy. We have a different theory of inflation. We have a different theory of geopolitics. We're going to use power to push a lot of this through. When Johnson came in, everybody who's worked with him has said the same thing. He didn't know what he wanted to do with power. He had no real idea. It wasn't really until the war in Ukraine that suddenly he found something that he was passionate about doing. And so out of this 80-seat majority was just an enormous waste. And so now the British Tories have become pathetic because in the UK, every morning you wake up and they say, please, please don't give Labour a big majority. Please don't give Labour a super majority. We'll change things. We'll stop immigration. We'll stop the small boats. We'll change things. And voters are saying, you've had 14 years. 14 years and an 80-seat majority. Why on earth would we trust you to do anything differently? So what you're going to see at this election, if the polls are right, because we're either heading into a massive Labour majority or the biggest crisis in the polling industry, in the history of the polling industry. But what you're going to see as well, is, if they're right, a generation of Conservatives losing their seats. Maybe even some of the frontline Conservatives, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Penny Mordaunt, potentially Rishi Sunak, who knows. But if the polls are right, we're about to see a whole generation of Conservatives be thrown out of the House of Commons.